The following meeting is held during the COVID-19 emergency declaration. Will be conducted as a virtual meeting in accordance with Ohio's open meeting laws as amended by House Bill 404. The public may observe this meeting on YouTube at www.youtube.com, Cleveland City Council, and on Cleveland TV Channel 20, Spectrum Cable TV, as well as live streamed online at TV 20. For more information, go to Cleveland City Council's website, https://www.clevelandcitycouncil.org. As we start this meeting, this is a presentation that is being brought to us by RTA, the Greater Cleveland Regional Transit Authority, concerning their proposal changes, and their organization for these changes is called the Next Gen. And I want to open it up first to our members of Cleveland City Council, if you could tell who you are and what ward you're from, and then if we can have RTA introduce themselves and then talk about this presentation that they have before the City Council. So we'll start with Kevin Conwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me shut this door real quick. Mr. Chairman, RTA used to, I think.
What we want you to do, what we would like for you to do, Mr. Conwell, is just introduce yourself, and then we'll open it up to the floor after the presentation.
All right, good. I'm Councilmember Kevin Conwell, and thank you, because I was so passionate getting ready to turn up right away, Mr. Chairman. You know, I was out in the neighborhood, and I received 500 signatures, people pointing their finger at me instead of RTA. But anyway, I'll introduce myself. I'm Councilmember Kevin Conwell, Glenville, Ward 9. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Slife. Distinguished gentleman, Mr. Slife, Ward 17.
My name is Councilman Slife from Ward 17, Vice Chair of the committee. A lot of RTA infrastructure in the neighborhood, a couple bus lines, 3 or 4 rapid stations. Happy to have you all today present and answer our questions.
Ward Councilwoman of 14, the distinguished lady, Jasmine Santana.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and congratulations on your new role. Really excited about this. So Councilwoman Jasmine Santana, representing Ward 14, which is on the near west side of Cleveland. Thank you for the invite.
Thank you. To distinguished colleague representing Ward 2, Kevin Bishop.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Kevin Bishop, Ward 2, Union Miles. I got the route 1519. I think the 48 and the 50 goes through my ward. Thank you.
Illustrious Mr. Harrison, representing Ward 10.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Anthony Harrison, representing Ward 10 on the northeast side.
Ward 5, distinguished lady, Mrs. Dolores Gray.
All right, thank you, Chairman. Ward 5, the red, blue, and green, the Healthline bus, the number 8, 11, 14, and 15.
And with that being said, I see the president of Cleveland City Council and Mr. Griffin, if you guys could, in that order, Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate you pulling this hearing together. This is incredibly important, and the community needs to know, what to expect in terms of public transportation. And I think that, especially, and I think I heard the most about the 38 line, but I've been through this before in Old Brooklyn when service has been cut, and it is very impactful of people's lives. So I think we really just need to treat this with the degree of seriousness that it deserves. Mr. Chair, I'm going to apologize to you. I'm multitasking a little bit. There's a Justice Center steering committee that I'm on, and I'm going to kind of be in and out. So no disrespect to the committee, but I'm going to kind of be in and out. So thank you for allowing me to say a few words.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. This is Councilman Griffin. Thank you for pulling this together. I know how important this is for the residents. I really appreciate you responding as quick as you have. A lot of residents have called myself as well as other colleagues. This is a critical service. We know that public transportation is very critical to the citizens of the city of Cleveland. So I hope that this yields the results that you anticipate. And like Council President said, I am multitasking, but I thought it was very important to be here to support you as well as my colleagues, and also to make sure that the residents get answers. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Griffin. I'd like to open it up to RTA to talk about the proposed changes that will be having an impact on the citizens of the city of Cleveland, not just only here, but also throughout the region. And I want to introduce, I presume the spokesperson is Mrs. Minor.
Thank you, Councilman. And I am here with 3 of my colleagues here at RTA. What we will do is we will introduce ourselves, and then I will ask Vacadia to allow me to use the share screen so that we can walk through our presentation. The presentation will be presented by Joel Freilich, who will introduce himself, but that is the order for which we are moving. And before I introduce myself, I want to say congratulations to you, Councilman Jones, on this role. And I certainly want to welcome Councilwoman Gray. It is wonderful for you to join the team after having worked with you for a number of years in another capacity with Care Alliance and also with CMHA for a number of years. So I know where your heart is. I feel like I'm amongst friends. I've known and worked with each of you for at least the last 15 years. I'm Natoya Walker Minor, and I have the privilege to serve here at RTA as the Deputy General Manager of Administration and External Affairs. To my left?
Yes, I'm Joel Freilich. I'm Director of Service Management. I've been with the RTA since 1991, and I'm very, very pleased to continue dialogue today with members of the Cleveland City Council.
To Joel's left?
Good morning. My name is Jeffrey Macko. I'm Planning Team Leader here at RTA.
And to Jeff's left?
I'm Christy Cox. I'm the Marketing Manager.
Thank you. So this is our team. So we have service management, we have communications, and myself here. But Katia, may I take control of the screen to screen share?
You have the ability.
Can you see the screen?
Can we do slideshow? Yeah.
Yes, we can.
Okay. The slide deck will be facilitated by Joel Freilich, who is going to walk us through this presentation. We timed it. It's between 14 and 16 minutes. It talks about each and every ward. So I ask that you allow us to get through the presentation so that we can talk about each ward, and then we'll welcome your questions. Joel.
Before we move ahead of this, this presentation that we have in front of us is a presentation that most of the council members, it was just sent over to us today. So did the council members in the past receive these presentations?
So I'm going to try to be very brief, Mr. Chairman, if you'll allow me to, within 15 minutes, if I go quickly, I'll be able to touch on each ward, and then I hope that will leave adequate time for dialogue. With your permission, I would like to do that, sir.
Yes, Mr. Freilich. The question, though, is this presentation that we have in front of us, were any of the council members briefed previously concerning their respective territories and wards?
Well, we did. This exact PowerPoint presentation was shared only today with the City of Cleveland. However, on September 30th of 2020, we had a hearing before the Transportation Committee. And during that committee, we had nice attendance from members of the Transportation Committee and other counselors as well. And during that meeting, we offered the opportunity to meet one-on-one with individual counselors, and many counselors did take advantage of that opportunity. And I enjoyed meeting with several of you back then. But again, I'd like to start with a clean slate and not presume that that this is familiar. Also, remember, we did make improvements since September 30th because we got feedback from counselors and they said, hey, this is a problem for me. Can you reconsider? So we did some reconsideration. And so therefore, this is in a sense new. I hope that answers your question, sir.
It does a little bit, but just want to get a little bit more granular with it real quick before we go into the presentation, because that's important. A number of my colleagues are not aware of the changes or the proposition or proposed changes. So it sounds like you've had a meeting on September 20th, September 30th of 2020. How many councilmen did you talk to concerning these proposed changes in their wards?
I'm sorry, I can't give you, I don't recall the precise number of those who attended as well as those who participated in the follow-up meetings.
So we're not sure how many members of Cleveland City Council that you spoke with? You're not sure if it's one or two?
Councilman Jones, Chairman Jones, respectfully, there was a transportation committee held on September 30th, 2020. And just from my familiarity and the processes in Cleveland City Council, we know that that advertisement goes to all city council members. So all city council members have the opportunity to attend that meeting. As a result of that meeting and whoever showed up at that meeting, Joel and his team offered and extended to members to have input as we've gone through this process. This process, this restructuring, right? This re-engineering, this system redesign that we're going through, that we've completed, is one of 5 pillar studies that we've gone through to really reframe and rebrand RTA. And we've been very public about that. We had a myriad of community meetings across the city of Cleveland, across Cuyahoga County, and this has been going on for a 2-year period. So I ask respectfully, sir, that we allow Joel to walk through this presentation so that yourself and the other members that are present can see the high points of this restructuring, which is greater access, improved frequency, greater connectivity to jobs, education, healthcare, and entertainment across all wards. In addition, we have reduced the cost of the all-day pass by 50 cents. And because of the system redesign and the greater connectivity, there is less of a chance that one would have to transfer because the routes have improved that much. So I ask again respectfully to allow us to get through the presentation so you and your colleagues can see the differences and then raise the questions.
Madam Chairwoman, I'm calling you sound like a chairwoman. Mrs. Minor, let me just state this as the chairperson. I'll move in the direction of asking the questions. We will have the presentation. I appreciate your, and again, congratulations. You have just been assigned that role. How long have you been in that role?
3 months this week.
3 months. So Madam Chairwoman, Mrs. Minor, I've asked the distinguished gentleman how many council members he's spoken to concerning the presentation. If he's not aware of that, that's fine. But as the chairperson of this committee, a number of my colleagues have given me a phone call. They talked about the seriousness of the changes and how some of these changes may have not such a positive impact on their communities. So that was the reason, Mrs. Minor, that I asked the distinguished gentleman, did he remember how many people that he had an opportunity to talk to. And I sit on this committee and I recall some of this discussion, but I have not had a meeting in my neighborhood concerning that. So, but it's good that you're here this morning so that we can iron out and see this proposal in its entirety. So I really appreciate your professionalism, and this council person will yield to the floor to allow the presentation to happen. And then we'll hold questions after this presentation. But I just wanted to make sure, Mrs. Minor, as I've spoken to you concerning the proposed changes in my neighborhood and the participation of the citizens in my community, a lot of the folks did not and were not aware of any kind of community forums being held. And in the past, Mrs. Minor, it has always historically been a good meeting with RTA. Over 20 years ago, they would have meetings in each of the distinguished wards that were making those changes in, and the citizens had an opportunity to participate in those changes. So at the end of the day, I hope that we can continue that long history of engagement with elected officials. Each one of the members who sit here on Cleveland City Council represents 25,800 people. And if they have not had a community meeting in their respective territories and communities, that should be, and it should have had happened. And if not, we look to that happening in the future. So as we make this presentation here, and the viewing audience who will be in attendance, all the citizens may not be here on this hearing. So with that being said, I open the floor up, Mrs. Minor, to you and your team.
Bill. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I personally hope to be involved in future conversations with each councilman at ward meetings and other meetings in their wards. I enjoy those interactions. I'd like to move ahead here and talk to you about Next Gen RTA. I will say that in the past, sometimes we come to the community because we've received a significant funding cut. That is not true now, but in the past, we've held meetings because we received funding cuts, revenue, and had to reduce service, and that was the whole tone of the meeting. Fortunately, this last 2-year process is not about a reduction in service. It's purely about improvements, and I'm so pleased to be bringing those improvements forward. Next Gen RTA is the bus system redesign that resulted from a whole system redesign study that RTA staff conducted with Jarrett Walker and Associates and local stakeholders. The expertise of Jarrett Walker and Associates is to facilitate community conversations about transit so that we can elicit the community's priorities for their transit system. We conducted public engagement throughout 2019 and again in fall 2020. We received comments. We were thrilled with the response that we got. We got so many comments from every community and every ward. People stepped forward. They came and talked to us at recreation centers and libraries and transit stations and bus stops and multifamily housing sites. They also talked to us online, and they talked to us at 621-9500, a number that we have kept open at all times for public comment and the exchange of information that remains open today and into the future and forever. Through public engagement, residents asked RTA to provide more frequent bus service. That was the big emphasis, with special focus on access to work, education, and healthcare. The result is shown by comparing these two graphs to this is the service that ends coming this Saturday. It is our current network, and its last day in service is this Saturday. It shows you the weekday midday service, and all the streets are shown that have any bus service, and they're color coded by the frequency of service because the community said frequency is all important. Today's service, red is 15 minutes or better, and red on Cleveland streets appears only on West 25th Street, on Euclid Avenue, and on the streets served by the number 15 bus route that include Broadway, Union, and Harvard. No other streets have all day 15-minute service. Blue is shown on a few additional routes. You might notice Quincy Avenue is in blue and Kinsman is in blue, and just a few other streets are in blue. Purple is every 20-minute service. A lot of lines are light green, and those light green lines are 40 to 45-minute service, and many Cleveland residents need to go to those places for jobs, education, and healthcare, and they're experiencing 40 to 45-minute service. Gray is hourly service. What we start, the service that is all programmed and will begin on Sunday is much better, as shown in this next map, where now many additional routes, many additional streets, besides the ones I mentioned, will receive that every 15 minutes all day service, to include Lorraine Avenue, Detroit Avenue, St. Clair, Superior, Kinsman, all of Broadway out to Miles. So a big improvement on the red. Also East 105th Street upgrades to 15-minute service, as does Woodhill and East 93rd. And in additional, many streets upgrade to 30-minute blue colored service. And many of those streets are places where where Cleveland residents need to go for their jobs, education, healthcare, and other activities. Let's go. What does this really mean for the quality of life, that frequency? And what does this new next gen RTA mean for quality of life? Here's what it means. For a few riders, there are more minutes spent every week walking to and from bus stops. But for nearly all riders, including those riders above, it means fewer hours per week spent on their way to work, education, and healthcare and other activities, fewer hours per week spent on the way home from those destinations. And that means for them, more hours per week available for other activities. Because in fact, it is the frequency of service that is the principal determinant of how long it will take you to get home from your job, your class, your medical appointment. Next Gen RTA, I'll now run through for each ward quickly. If you're a Ward 1 resident, you will receive new one-seat rides to Tri-C East and new one-seat rides to Chagrin Boulevard jobs that would otherwise require you to transfer. More frequent service on weekdays on Kinsman and Lee in Ward 1, and brand new Saturday, Sunday service on East 116th Street, Kane, East 143rd, Ohio Avenue, Seville, Tarkington, and East 177th, as Mr. Chairman, you and I discussed in person recently. In Ward 2, new one-seat rides will be available to Steelyard Commons that are not available today, and new one-seat rides to jobs in Northeast Cleveland and in the city of Euclid. One-seat ride, again, meaning you can get all the way there without changing transit vehicles. New one-seat rides will be available in Ward 2 from Kinsman to Tri-C East and to Chagrin Boulevard jobs, and also from Miles Road to Tri-C East and Harvard Park jobs. More frequent service will be enjoyed on East 93rd and on Turney. Brand new weekend through service from Turney Road to downtown without the need to transfer in the vicinity of Miles and 93rd. New service on Warner Road, a street in Cleveland that has not had transit service since 2010. Ward 3 residents will enjoy new access to Tri-C West Shore campus and new one-seat rides to Steelyard Commons from Clark Avenue. New one-seat rides to Cam's Corner and Fairview Hospital from residents who are within walking distance of Lorraine Avenue. New one-seat rides to West Suburban jobs without transferring, all the way out as far as Crocker Park. New one-seat rides to Cedar Road jobs and Mayfield Road jobs. New one-seat rides to Tri-C East and Chagrin Boulevard jobs. Some residents of Ward 3 will experience more frequent weekday service on Detroit, Lorraine, Fulton, Clark, St. Clair, and Superior, and more frequent Saturday and Sunday service on Fulton and Clark. Residents of Ward 4 will see new one-seat rides to jobs in Northeast Cleveland and in Euclid. New one-seat rides to Tri-C East and Chagrin Boulevard jobs for Ward 4, and more frequent service in Ward 4 on Kinsman, Woodhill, East 93rd. And brand new Saturday and Sunday service on East 116th Street in Ward 4. That street has not had Saturday, Sunday service since 2010. I was there during all those cuts. I'm pleased to be here now during the restoration of service. New one-seat rides. Ward 5 residents will experience new one-seat rides from their homes near Quincy Avenue to jobs all along Cedar Road. Also, new one-seat rides to Tri-C East and Chagrin Boulevard jobs, and more frequent weekday service on Payne, on Kinsman, and on Broadway for Ward 5. Residents of Ward 6 will experience new one-seat rides, no transfer required, to get to jobs in Northeast Cleveland and in the city of Euclid, as well as new one-seat rides to Cedar Road jobs, and new non-transfer rides to Tri-C East and Chagrin Boulevard jobs. Residents of Ward 6 will see more frequent service in their ward on Kinsman, East 93rd, Wood Hill, and East 105th. Residents of Ward 7 will experience new one-seat rides to job opportunities in Northeast Cleveland and in Euclid. Also, new one-seat rides to Mayfield Road jobs as a result of a change where the 9 takes over, gets extended onto stops that used to be covered by 38. Residents will experience more frequent weekday service on St. Clair and Superior and Payne and Lexington and Huff and East 105th Street. On weekends, more double frequent service on Saturday and Sunday on Payne and Lexington and Huff. Residents of Ward 8 will have new one-seat rides to the VA Hospital and Cleveland Clinic and more frequent weekday service on East 140th Street in Ward 8, along with Lakeshore East 152nd and East 185th. Residents of Ward 9 will see new one-seat rides to jobs in Northeast Cleveland and in Euclid that would require a transfer today, but next week, transfer will not be required. And more frequent weekday service will be experienced in Ward 9 on St. Clair and Superior and East 105th and Lakeview. In Ward 10, residents will see new one-seat rides to Tri-C East from Green Road near Euclid. One bus all the way to Tri-C East with the extension of the 34, and more frequent weekday service on Superior, St. Clair, East 110th, and Hazeldale, service on the number 40 that's improved. Ward 11 residents will see new one-seat rides to Fairview Hospital and Cam's Corner without the necessity of transferring at West Park Station. Similarly, new one-seat rides to West Suburban jobs and new access to Tri-C West Shore that to this week is not served by RTA, but next week it will be. New service on parts of Madison in the city of Cleveland that have not had a bus since 2010. More frequent weekday service on Detroit and on Lorraine and West 117th and Bel Air. More frequent Saturday and Sunday service, meaning twice an hour instead of once an hour on West 117th and Bel Air in Ward 11. Brand new Sunday service on Clifton Boulevard in Ward 11. In Ward 12, residents will see new one-seat rides to Tri-C West from Pearl Road. Residents near Harvard Jennings will have weekend service. There are some residents just southwest of the corner of Harvard and Jennings that have only 5-day access to RTA. They'll have 7-day RTA access to RTA. There'll be a new 7-day route going across the river, not through downtown. It's the 18. It will connect Marymount Hospital in the east to the West Boulevard Red Line Station and travel through Broadway, Slavic Village, and Steelyard Commons. It's operating 7 days a week and giving additional people access to Steelyard Commons for their shopping or their jobs. Improved access in Ward 12 to Tri-C East and jobs on Richmond Road, and more frequent weekday service in Ward 12 on Broadway. Residents of Ward 13 will see new one-seat rides to Tri-C West from Pearl Road, and more frequent weekday service in Ward 13 on Fulton and on Memphis. Similarly, more frequent weekend service on Fulton and Memphis. And Brook Park Road in Ward 13 will have weekend service. It has not had that in many, many years. And it will have 7-day service on Ward 13 on Brook Park Road. In Ward 14, residents will see new one-seat rides to Fairview Hospital and Cam's Corner without having to transfer at West Park Station. New one-seat rides to West Suburban jobs as well. New one-seat rides to Slavic Village and Marymount Hospital via the new 18 that I described. New one-seat rides to Tri-C West from Pearl Road. New non-transfer rides to Steelyard Commons from Clark Avenue. Clark Avenue residents hop on a bus will be able to next week get on a bus on Clark and, for example, Clark and Fulton, Clark and West 65th, and get on a bus all the way to Steelyard Commons. More frequent weekday service on Lorraine and on Fulton and on Clark in Ward 14. More frequent Saturday, Sunday service on Fulton and Clark. In Ward 15, residents will have new non-transfer rides to Steelyard Commons from Madison stops and West 65th stops and Clark Also, one-seat rides to Fairview Hospital and Cam's Corner along Lorraine. New one-seat rides to West Suburban Jobs and non-transfer rides to Slavic Village and Marymount Hospital on that new route. New access to Tri-C West Shore, which we don't serve today, but next week we will. New service on Madison and West 65th in Ward 15. And also in Ward 15, more frequent weekday service on Detroit, Lorraine, West 117th and Clark. More frequent Saturday, Sunday service on West 117th and Clark, and brand new Sunday service on Clifton. Residents of Ward 16 will experience new one-seat rides to Fairview Hospital and Camps Corner and West Suburban Jobs. More frequent weekday service in the ward on Lorraine, West 117th, Puritas, West 130th, West 140th, and Saturday, Sunday service on West 117th, Bel Air, Puritas, West 130th, and West 140th. In Ward 17 residents will be able to have a bus from their ward that goes all the way to downtown Cleveland without requiring a transfer at West Park Station via Lorraine, something that's not available today. Next week, it's coming. More frequent weekday service in Ward 17 will be provided on Lorraine and Warren and Puritas and Grayton and a small section of Brook Park Road. And on Saturday and Sunday on Warren and Puritas and Grayton, the service will be more frequent. And the service on Rocky River Drive will be upgraded from 6 days a week to 7 days a week with the addition of new Sunday service on Rocky River Drive. Again, in summary, this is the service that begins next week. The drivers have their assignments and they're excited about it. The passengers have their timetables and they're excited about it. Frequent service all day long throughout every ward, and not only through every ward, but also somewhat improved service in the inner suburbs where City of Cleveland residents need to go to get their needs met. Once again, the quality of life is really what we're boiling it down to here. That's the most important thing. A small number of riders have to walk further to the bus stop, but they, along with other Cleveland residents, will experience fewer hours per week from the moment they leave home till the time they finally get to their destination, and from the moment they clock out of work or finish their class or finish their healthcare appointment till they're in their front door. That's fewer hours per week on the way there, fewer hours per week on the way home, more hours per week available for other activities. That is the quality of life impact. Mr. Chairman, thank you for giving me this time, and I would be pleased to respond to questions.
Thank you, Mr. Joe Frolick, for your presentation. And I saw that for each of the wards you put in community. In each of these neighborhoods, as we all are aware, there's the services that are added and then services that were taken away. Do you have for showing also for each of the wards what those changes will be?
Mr. Chairman, thank you for your question. I'm having a little slow transmission on the electronics, but I believe I've heard the question and I will respond. Within the city of Cleveland, there is a section that we have talked about involving a section of East 123rd Street and a block of Arlington and a block of East 125th Street, where the 38 will no longer stop because the 38 comes from Payne, Huff, and Lexington, and through system redesign and public involvement, it was decided that it was very important. I'm sorry, I hope my answer is not too long, but we decided that it is very effective to have the bus that serves Payne and Huff Avenue and Lexington Avenue continue out Mayfield Road to provide access to jobs and health care. and it was not as effective for that bus to drive on East 123rd and East 125th. We did discuss East 125th with Councilman Hairston in a joint meeting with Councilman Polensik. That Councilman Hairston raised important questions and asked us about a school there and asked us about ridership there. We were able to show that ridership is light in that area, and we were able to show that each stop is near to either Lakeview or St. Clair, or in some cases, the stop is near Lakeview as well as being near Superior. And so, but I am being upfront with you and letting you know about that. There is a section that is served right in Case Western Reserve University on Ford Drive. It will continue to have service from the University Circle buses, but it will not have an RTA bus driving on Ford Drive. So I bring that to your attention, sir. Also bring to your attention that there is a section of Rocky River Drive just north of Lorraine, where the bus makes a sharp right from northbound Rocky River onto Munn Road. It was determined through our system redesign that it would be more effective for not riders of the 86, that the great majority of them wanted the 86 to serve all the Lorraine Road stops instead of the Munn Road stops. So that is the change. In providing the brand new service on Madison, west of West 98, some of those buses today are on a short block of Berea. So I bring forward to you that that short block of Berea will not have a bus. And I had a wonderful conversation with a councilman. I think it was perhaps Councilman Kelly. I'm very bad with names. I'm terribly sorry if I've got the name wrong, but we discussed how we have improved how we connect Steelyard to Tremont neighborhood. And with our improved alignment, instead of driving through the corner of Starkweather and West 14th, we are driving instead through the corner of 7th and Starkweather. 7th and Starkweather is the Tremont West housing complex. And we felt that it was more important to be close to those residents. Meaning that from the corner of Starkweather and West 14th, one does have to walk a little further. I hope Councilman will forgive me if I've forgotten any other segments, and I'd be happy to follow up later if there's more to talk about. But yes, there are certain places where a person needs to walk further, but they are rewarded by a more frequent service after they complete their walk. And some people are making that walk today. They're ignoring the hourly bus service on their own street and walking a distance of 2 or 3 bus stops to a street with better service.
Mr. Frolick, thank you for that presentation as relates to some of the changes. Just nailing the question down a little bit more closer to home for my colleagues who are concerned about the changes in their respective territories. You have the presentations that talk about the services added. What are the services that are going to be taken away or changed in each of these neighborhoods? So you've given us a presentation on each community from Ward 1 through 17 about what this new next generation thing will do for their respective neighborhoods in terms of making it a lot quicker and faster for many people to have other opportunities and alternatives. What is those changes in those respective areas? What routes have been changed in each of the wards so that the council members will have an opportunity to compare and contrast this proposition you're bringing in front of us today?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your question. For example, as we discussed in Ward 1, all the Route 15 trips will go through that critically important intersection of Harvard and Lee. And as a result, we won't remove a few of those trips and have them drive on Walden anymore. Those Walden branch trips will all be moved to the main street. None of them will be taken away. This is something that I am having to get used to, and perhaps many of you have to get used to. For 20 years, I've been involved in route planning, and every time we were adjusting, we were always reducing. So it is hard to get used to the fact that so few reductions are happening this round. There's almost inside me a feeling of disbelief. Well, wait a minute, with all these improvements, what's the catch? Why aren't there another 40 streets that are losing service? And the answer is no. As I mentioned, I've already covered a little section of Walden, a little section of Bartlett, a little section of, in your own ward, a little section of 123rd Arlington and 125th, a little section of Munn, a short section of Rocky River Drive. Those are the losses. And we just talked about the section of 14. Let's start with it. I have a map in front of me. I don't think I missed anything. My colleague, yes. Oh, there's a good one. Thank you, Mr. Macco. Thank you. In order to make that marvelous improvement that I mentioned in many of your wards, if your ward has any of East 93rd or Wood Hill or East 105th, we're going to extend the Route 10 all the way through Collinwood and through Euclid to all those jobs and shopping opportunities. But in order to make that happen and to make those improvements on East 140th and Lakeshore, the number 10 buses, when they get to St. Clair, will not drive up 3 or 4 more stops to DuPont, because they're going to turn right on St. Clair and provide that much expanded service to the northeast. So Mr. Macco points out that there are some people who have a sign on their post right now. The sign's been up there for about 3 weeks, and it says RTA won't stop here after the 12th of June. So there are these small items. They absolutely are there. I don't want to minimize them.
Mr. Frolick, if I may, what I'm asking, I just want to make sure I'm really clear here, and you get it. I'm going to ask it again. What my colleagues in the council is asking for is the changes that are going to be happening in their communities. We see the positive benefits that you've shown us in a very flowery project here at presentation. We also would like to have the presentation that tells us where those changes are. A number of our colleagues and in their communities, and over the last couple of days, I've been hearing that they're not aware of any sessions and public meetings of RTA in their respective territories. They're not sure about what all the changes are going to be. So as public elected officials representing 25,700 to 800 people, we should be able to explain to our citizens what those proposed changes are going to be as you're making the presentation here, and also what the positive outcomes are with these changes. And this council really appreciates the fact that you have been with RTA for over 20 years. You have been involved with route changes. And so we certainly don't want to diminish your professionalism and your wherewithal of the years of experience and being able to add services. What we're asking for is, just as you have given us this presentation for our respective wards, we would like to also know about those route changes in our communities and how it would have an impact or not have an impact, and how your program is and will be probably one of the best route changes as you have made here in quite some time.
Thank you, Councilman. And of course, I really look forward to meeting separately with each councilman and really, putting a map on a table and talking to you. I also look forward, I hope that soon the COVID conditions will be in a situation where we can have ward meetings again in person. I would like to attend those meetings. I used to attend them. And even when in the days when I was usually bringing bad news, I still appreciated the opportunity to talk to the residents. And now I'm bringing good news with very minor things I can't think of any other. I mean, my colleague, what did you find? Oh, you found a section of East 174th Street between, but I've discussed this with the two gentlemen in Northeast Cleveland, Councilman Valensick and Councilman Hairston. And yes, there's a block of East 174th Street between Grove Wood and Lakeshore Boulevard that won't have a bus on it, but it's a very short stretch. And the only reason that we're doing that is the buses are getting so much better in that area. 10s are going to be there. The other thing that some citizens will, especially if they don't ride often, will say, oh, the number is changing. So let me dwell on that. Maybe that's responsive to your question.
Well, Mr. Frolick, and I know you're going, I do want to try to run a tight agenda here. The information that we're asking, this council is asking for right now is to have a listing of those changes in the neighborhoods. And I know that our country and the world and the planet has been dealing with the COVID virus, and it has had a major impact on the ability to have community meetings and sessions about the proposed changes that are in front of us today. What we would like to have is for each of the neighborhoods from wards 1 through 17, what are those route changes that are going to be cut out or deleted or changed in some kind of, or altered and what does that mean and what does that look like? And as we begin to move out through our neighborhoods and our communities, many of us as elected officials cannot articulate what those changes are. And so we need you to be able to educate us, communicate with us, and send us those proposed changes so that we're fully aware, not only on the good things you want to make the presentation for today, which seems to be very positive. It seems like it's a really thought out program that you put in place, but we like to also see those changes. I hope that's not too difficult for you.
No, sir, we will do it. We will follow up with a packet of some kind, a nice info packet tailored to each ward. We will do that.
And also, Mr. Frolick, I urge you also to get with the various different council members and depending on how the body, how this discussion goes here today, I encourage RTA to, as in the past years, and I'm reaching back at least 13 years ago, RTA had a really great relationship with every single ward. And they would have presentations that would be made in community meetings and forums. And the council members had a lot of discussion with RTA and could work with RTA on what those propositions and proposed changes are. Some of our members right now, currently, Mr. Frolick, feels like this is just being pushed on them. They haven't had any communications and they don't even know about the proposed changes in their respective territories. And there have not been any discussions with RTA. That's the reason why when I opened up the session, I wanted to ask you how many council members, not counselors, but council members you've had an opportunity to speak to as relates to these changes. But with that being said, I know you understand what I'm saying. I want to open up this opportunity for my colleagues so to talk about some of the concerns that they have. And if you could be succinct, Mr. Frolick, in your answering of the questions, meaning not to take up too much time, because we want to try to get through to some of the council members who are really having some issues with some of the propositions of change in their communities. So with that being said, I want to start out with Ward Council Person, the distinguished gentleman, Kevin Conwell. And then from after Mr. Conwell makes his presentation to ask questions, I want to go to the distinguished gentle lady, Jasmine Santana. And then I want to go to one of our other distinguished colleagues, Mr. Anthony Hairston, after that, and then we'll move from there. So with that being said, Councilman Conwell, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chairman Jones, for bringing this up. Here's a question to the chair. It's Frolick, right? Frolick?
Freilich, sir. Freilich.
You said that you guys held meetings in the community, the greater community. How many meetings did you hold? And your marketing, how did you reach out? I'm listening.
We put signs inside our buses and trains because we know that one way to reach our riders is to put signs in the buses and trains that they ride to notify them of meetings. We had 3 rounds of public involvement in 2019. And in 2019, we were using a mix of in-person meetings as well as opportunities to participate online and by telephone. And then we did one more round after meeting with Cleveland City Council on September 30th for that hearing, September 30th, 2020. Following that, we had one round that was purely virtual. It wouldn't have happened at all had COVID never happened. We got very good feedback by phone and some by email and some in person. And because it wasn't like the prior situations with budget cuts, but was really more about improvements and minor adjustments, it was a whole bunch of very positive conversations. And there were some issues about, the number 2 we had proposed to have no number 2 bus on East 79th Street, but based on public feedback, we decided that that was impacting too many people in a negative way. We had thought that we should not run on East 55th Street. We learned through public feedback that that was really impacting many, many people in a negative way. And so we decided to restore those services. So many, many meetings. I can't give you a precise number, and many, many online opportunities for people to participate.
City Chair, do you document your meetings? I mean, you're doing a survey analysis, and when you say you're going to do cuts, you have to put a graph next to it, and you have to say why you're doing the cuts, and as well as the documentation of who you talk with.
Yes, we'll follow up.
Yeah.
I can follow up with precise numbers. We can research and go count our meetings. We did meet at in places, and we always pay attention to making sure that our meetings are accessible both by car and by transit. Make sure that transit riders have a reasonable opportunity to get to the meeting. And we made sure that residents of every ward could reasonably attend our meetings. That's why we went to neighborhood recreation centers, libraries, other things in the community.
Let me tell you a quick story. Quick story. Through the chair. When the sewer district, Angela Jones, Darnella, I think her last name Robinson, and then after that, Jacqueline Muhammad. They met with my wife and I in our dining room, and they said, "Councilman, I will not embarrass you." I said, "Okay." They did a survey analysis, just like you guys, around the county about sewer different projects. You see the sewer, I forgot what you call those, but they are they're throughout different wards. And so they did what you did. They called people up and they did marketing, they did outreach. But guess what else they did? The area that they were going to affect, through the chair to Froelich. Guess what else they did? They called me up. They said, "Councilman, this is what Angela Jones said. You know what? I don't think we reached all the people that we're going to really affect on East 123rd Street." So I said to her, I said, "So what are you thinking?" She said, "Let's go do knock and talk with the residents so that we can have an up-close view and a sensitive ear about their needs." And we went door to door, Mr. Chairman, talking with the residents. So the residents, when something happened, some of the residents didn't like it, but they knew not to send Councilman Conwell 500 signatures to Councilman Conwell and to Councilmember Anthony Harrison, because they didn't know, they dealing with the RTA, just tell me that they don't know the RTA because they sent the signatures to Anthony Harrison, council member, and Councilmember Kevin Conwell. But with the sewer district, they reached out to Angela Jones at 881-6600, and they talked with her. And they knew to reach out to her. They're a special district, but they did outreach the right way. They knocked on the door. Okay, now go back to Frolic Way. They held community meetings, but the area that they were going to affect, they said it did knock and talk. And then you go back to that area on 123rd where the 38 line is at, and you do a random sample for the area that you're going to affect. You pull it out of the big, large sample, and you go to a smaller sample on that street. Where disabled people are at, where blind people, where people in wheelchairs, and you talk with them. And you try to figure out their issues and concerns also. Because the last time I checked, Mr. Froelich, guess what? My residents are my bosses, and they're your bosses too, because they also contribute to that $290 million that you receive from the federal government before Mrs. Jones or Mrs. Tabb ever put a nickel into the pot. Before they ever put a nickel in the pot, the money that you receive and the stimulus dollars that you receive it comes from the residents. The residents are your bosses and mine too. So you gotta respect them and go walk East 123rd Street so that you can get an up-close view of the community that you just pulled the buses out of, just like you did on Kinsman Road. You left them out. You left your bosses out. They're your board of directors. They're your real board of directors. And am I upset with it? You doggone right I am upset with you, leaving out people in the community like that. You just went and you cut it out. So who's gonna lobby for poor folks? And let me say this to the chair. Eric, I think his last name Robinson, before he cut, who asked me a question?
No, Eric Johnson.
Eric Johnson, before he cut the 3, he came and he met with me and he said, Councilman, they're gonna cut the 3 and Joe wants to meet with you and the residents in your community. So you saying to the chair, to Froelich, that the RTA reached out, how come they don't know your name? How come they sent the 500 signatures? I got them right here, to Council Member Kevin Conwell and Council Member Anthony Harrison. The outcome measure should be that they sent the signatures to you and that they had a line to reach you. They had no line to reach you, Froelich. This number 38 goes to Collinwood, Glenville, and Huff. And if you're going to affect the residents and people who are your bosses, then you need to reach out to them and tell them and talk with them. The people on the 38, they need that to go to grocery stores. You have mothers that in my neighborhood that take their children to daycare centers. And then they leave from the daycare center and they go to work. But by you not reaching out to them on the 38 line, you're creating a transit desert in that area. The poorest people. Do you even know where that route is at, going from Collinwood, Glenville to Huff? Have you ever walked it before? Have you ever felt it and talked with the residents? No, you just cut it and say it's going to be cut out, and I see signs up there saying that it's going to be cut.
Councilman Conwell, through the chair.
I'm not finished.
Well,
I sit back and listen.
the councilman.
Let me say this, Mr. Chairman.
Hold on just a moment, Mr. Conwell. Mr. Conwell, hold on, I'm gonna let you finish.
On purpose by not showing the cuts. When you do budgeting, you gotta show cuts too, also.
Mr. Conwell, just a moment, distinguished gentleman. To Mrs. Minor, this is a council-led meeting. Mr. Conwell will ask his questions, and after he's asked his questions, then RTA will respond likewise. So please give due consideration to the process here, and I would appreciate that. Mr. Conwell, continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And let me say this. I'm talking with Froelich. Ms. Minor was not there when they did it. She's saying that they did it, but she wasn't there. She just listening to them and taking the paperwork. I'm talking with my residents who don't even know RTA. They sent Councilmember Anthony Harrison. They probably even sent it to Councilmember Bashir Jones with 500 signatures saying that they're being left out. Who's going to fight for poor folks? Who's going to fight for poor folks, Mr. Chairman? I'm asking for a moratorium, that we go into these areas that's been cut and that we actually study. I'm asking for a moratorium, that we go into the areas and then we talk with them about resources. That's what I'm asking for. You just turn around and cut, and I get 500 signatures, and you tell me, Mr. Chairman, they're saying that they went out and talked with the residents, then why are they sending me signatures? Why are they sending me signatures? Why are they sending the council members signatures? Because they didn't reach out to them. They just cut them. You just cut the people out. They paid their tax-paying citizens. They're American citizens also. I'm gonna say this in my conclusion. I know cutting this bus line is also going to increase tardiness. I'm already dealing with joblessness in that area. It's going to increase tardiness as well as absenteeism. And then some people, let me tell you this, they don't even recruit in those areas that don't have bus lines because they figure, how are you going to get to work? How are you going to get to work? RTA just created a barriers to employment also. So some places don't even recruit the places that I'm dealing with joblessness. So I say to you, Mr. Chairman and Mr. President, and we're even talking about protesting the RTA in the long run about this, because yes, I am hot, yes, I am mad, and they left my residents out. And I yield for the second. I want to know how they're going to reach out and make this right for my residents. They don't even know about it. The only thing they know about, Mr. Chairman, is they're going to be cuts. To the chair and you and to Froelich, I need you to answer that.
Mr. Conwell, what your statements are certainly been heard loud and clear. And one of the things I also want to say, the city, we want to continue to have that great relationship. We want to look at ways and means that we can handle these sensitive situations in the respective territories and have an open dialogue of communications with not only the elected officials in the area, but also the public in which they represent. There has been a proposition of a moratorium put on the table. We do follow by Robert Rules of Order, but I do want to give RTA an opportunity to please address the distinguished council member in Ward 9, Kevin Conwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to Councilman Conwell through the chair. I do want to emphasize that bus trips that this week are on East 123rd Street will remain in the neighborhood. They will be transferred over to Lakeview in the ward. The intent is to improve service. Even a resident of 123rd Street will still be able to get to their destination sooner and home sooner, because the bus once the bus trip is moved over to Lakeview, it will result in more frequent service on Lakeview. Other residents are ignoring the bus stops on 123rd because the service is not frequent enough to be efficient for people who have to get places. It is still valued, we do know, for a person who is mobility impaired and perhaps not making as many trips, and they're more concerned with a short walk than how long it will take them to get home from their ultimate destination. And so differences of priorities do occur even within the same building on the same street. I do want to continue the dialogue. Although, of course, our service is going to happen on Sunday, there are always opportunities to refine our service. We change by contract with our union, we do have 4 opportunities per year to adjust service. And I look forward to more dialogue with the community to see what can be done to further improve the service.
Let me ask you this question. Let me ask a question. How much money do you guys receive from the federal government? It's like $270 million that you receive from them. Is that true?
Mr. Chairman, what I can tell you is that the next GEN RTA service that starts next week represents a bit more spending than this week's service. So this is not about a a service reduction or a cut. This is about service improvements.
Well, let me ask you this question, because when you look at your cost of labor, are you top heavy with labor that you could make some cuts with labor instead of cutting out the poor people that they can't get the jobs? So if you might have 2 to 3 people doing a certain job function, sometimes you can cut back on that. So that way you can use the money and to be more efficient. When you did your strategic planning, did you look at the inner scope, looking at the cost of labor, and that way you could cross-train some workers, and that the people who truly need help, the people who are disadvantaged, who have no one to speak up for them when they go downstate or whatever the case may be, if we can cut back on labor and trim some of that fat in RTA, then in the long run, I tell you what, then Mrs. Jones, who is blind, can catch the bus to go to work, or she can take her kids to daycare center. The first thing we look at is how can we cut routes? And that's why you didn't show it in your presentation.
Mr. Chairman, may I respond?
Yes, and I do want to remind my colleague we're a little bit over the time limit, so I do want to get to Jack and move on. But yes.
Just a brief response. Again, we do have 4 opportunities per year to change. Our next one is August 8th. And our next one after that is later in the year. I'm absolutely happy to talk further. This is not a budget cut, so it's unlike all the other times we've come to council in the past 20 years. It's not a budget cut.
Here's what I'd like to see, Mr. Froelich. Can you get with Kevin Conwell, work with him and his community to make sure that as you're talking about the proposition of change, work with him and his community and his people and communicate and having some kind of forum where you have some flexibility in this program to assist him and his community? Can you do that?
I can commit to meet with the Honorable Councilman Conwell and with anyone else you would like to have to come to the meeting. Absolutely. I want to continue dialogue with all councilmen indefinitely.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
And then I'll yield because I know I'm
Mr.
going
Chairman, yes, Mr. Conwell.
You know, they need to change their outreach, number one. I mean, just don't, you gotta do outreach. You gotta do knock and talk, and you have to talk with people. You know how we do as council members. We go out and we talk with residents. And they have to do that. Even if the residents don't make it to the meetings, you gotta go out and you have to talk with them. You know, I was out there all this week discussing about the RTA, and people were telling me about, and it's really sad, Mr. Chairman, and I wish the council president, Kelly, just come out there with me and bring some RTAs and we representatives, and we talk with some of the people that have to catch the buses, and they see the disabled people, and they meet the blind woman, and they meet people in wheelchairs. See, he's not discussing, Mr. President, East 125th Street. See, it's 125th Street and 123rd that have to catch the bus. They say 123rd, maybe because he don't know, because he haven't been out there to see the lay of the land, sir. What I'm moving to do, and I'll close, I'll yield out of respect to everyone. I'm even contemplating later on, even protesting the RTA in the long run. I'm not a happy camper.
Well, I think Mr. Conwell, Mr. Joe Froelich and RTA understands very well that they need to come meet with you and your citizens in your neighborhood, talk about these propositions. And I'm quite sure it's going to be a positive response. And with that being said, this chairman supports you and your community and all of my colleagues who sit here at this table. And certainly I know that the president of Cleveland City Council is certainly concerned of the situation, because I think we're all having the issue of communications right now. So I don't just think that it's just one council member, but it's all of us. So I hope RTA understands that we have enjoyed a great relationship with RTA. I've been one of those members in the past and even now that supports funding, as well as looking at ways and means to get RTA more funding so that we can expand those programs. So I think that it would be in our best interest as partners to work together to have the flexibility needed to make sure that our members are taken care of in the city of Cleveland as they represent efficiently and effectively over 25,800 people. So with that being said, I want to move on to Joe. Will you set up and your team set up a meeting with Mr. Conwell so that you can go over what those changes are, and as well as set up a community forum and for all of my colleagues who are and would like to have a community forum in their respective territories, that you make that happen so that you can talk about the presentation that you've shared here with the community, in addition to the changes that will be happening in those districts. So I think that is something that we're asking for here at this table is to have an open dialogue, because again, as my colleague said, he doesn't want to wear the jacket of RTA decisions and it having a negative impact on him. And certainly during these times right now, we don't want to have a situation where people are unable, don't have the capacity. These changes have had a negative impact on them. And I'm quite sure, as you have sat down with me and explained the routes in my neighborhood, that same presentation needs to be brought to the citizens as a whole in each territory. So with that, Kevin Conwell, I'm asking RTA to do that. Are RTA, the representatives there, Mr. Frolick, are you open to doing that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to move on to the distinguished lady, Jasmine Santana. You're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Could you hear me?
Yes, I hear you loud and clear.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. So I must say that there's been several community engagement events in the past couple years in Ward 14. However, we were in the midst of a pandemic, so the participation was low. I do want to take this opportunity to publicly thank the consultant team in the area, which was David Jerka, and RTA has an amazing new board member, Roberta Duarte, which is a great representative in the Latino community. So just want to thank them because they were out there reaching residents and, engaging them in the process. But I have a few questions, and through the chair to the RTA team, I would like to go back to the Mr. Frolick's comment about some riders having to walk further to some of the bus routes. I remember walking with my mom, carrying, bags full of grocery, and it was painful. And every step I took was like an eternity walking to that bus stop. So I know bottom line, it does make a difference. So do you have an estimated number of riders that will have to walk longer to these bus stops? And have you calculated how much longer will they have to walk?
Mr. Chairman, if I may respond, to the best of my knowledge, in Ward 14, I do not think there is any bus stop that is being removed. And if I'm correct in that, and my colleague is checking with me, then there is no additional walking required in Ward 14 under Next Gen. And therefore, all the improvements I discussed come at no downside.
So through the chair to Mr. Frolick, and I'm asking as an overall for the city, not just the ward. Do you have estimated, a number of how many residents will be impacted by walking longer?
So I would believe that fewer than 1% of all RTA riders will walk further as a result of Next Gen RTA. It's surely fewer than 1%. I'm not sure whether it's fewer than 0.5%, so I'll just be safe and say it's fewer than 1%.
Thank you, Mr. Frolick. And my next question is, and I'm not sure if you mentioned it, but how many residents submitted a survey and gave input on the changes?
I'm sorry, I do not have that information right now. I can seek to try to get that information to you.
Yes, if you could share that information, that would be helpful. And then my last question is, are these changes final? And if so, is RTA planning to have community meetings about the new changes in the neighborhood as a follow-up to the changes?
We would like to have follow-up meetings because although Next Gen RTA will take effect this Sunday with all of its improvements and all of its drawbacks, to be frank. But we never stop listening. RTA never stops listening, and RTA is very open to fine tunings to see if we can do even better than this package of improvements. And we love to meet in the community, in your ward, and in all other wards where there's an interest.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Frolick. I yield.
Thank you, Mr. Frolick. I'd like to move to the next council person, the distinguished Ward Councilman Ward 10, Anthony Harrison. And then I'd like to move on to our colleague, Ward 7, Barshir Jones. Councilman Anthony Harrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You were cutting up a little bit, but I was able to hear you. Thank you for pulling this hearing together today. Thank you to the RTA staff who and the team who came to present to us today. So let me start off by saying that my opposition to these changes is the same as it was when you had a discussion with us back in the first part of the year about what potentially Next Gen RTA was looking to do in these neighborhoods. So I want to make that clear off the bat. My opposition is still the same as it was from the beginning of this year regarding the cuts to the number 38, 140th, 152nd bus. And the reasons are still the same as well. As I noted previously, as Councilman Conwell eloquently put it, that there is two grocery stores that sit along this route, the 38 route, Shaw Save Norris, well, actually two Save-A-Lots that sit along this corridor. You have two K-8 schools. You have one community center that services seniors, young people, and those in between, which is the St. Martin DuPort Center. And you have many residential homes that sit between these corridors as well. And one of the things that you mentioned was that, and it seemed that it kind of rubbed me the wrong way when you said, well, I don't understand what the big deal is essentially when we're making all these good changes. And this is a minor route that, folks only have to walk a short distance to go to another bus line. Well, if you know the route, that may be particularly true for those who may get on the bus around 129th Street or maybe get on the bus around Lakeview and Superior. But all of the individuals in between that route, as you leave from Save-A-Lot 123rd and you go down past Old Captain Off the Raw, which is now Citizens Academy, down past Patrick Henry, you can't say the same. So a walk from Thornhill in East Cleveland at Hart Street down to St. Clair, that is a long distance for Ms. Barnes, who rides this bus frequently to go to the grocery store, right? Who go to her doctor's appointments to make the connection to the other line. So I really ask RTA not to minimize what you all believe are small adjustments to a route change, but are big adjustments to those who live and who frequent this route in that community. So that's first and foremost. And Councilman Conwell indicated that we received signatures from 500 individuals, 500 individuals within that community. This isn't 500 individuals from Shaker or Cleveland Heights or Euclid or other places. These are 500 individuals who signed a petition. Folks went out and did the work and who submitted to us, not to you all, to us, because clearly there was not efficient and an effective communication done with those residents who lived there. I received several calls from those who live in my ward and outside of my ward, just kind of asking what was going on. Because if I recall, these conversations that we initially had were just ideas. The 55th bus, 140th bus, 152nd bus, 38th bus were all ideas about what the study yielded and what you all were thinking about doing. But no one, and I'm sure from my other colleagues, no one came back to me and said, we are making these changes officially. This is when the signs will be posted on the bus stops to let people know that the route will not be there anymore. And if we received that, I don't recall that. I don't sit on transportation, but I didn't receive that as an individual. So what we're asking is that some of these cuts, such as the 38 bus and some of the changes along 152nd, would not have taken take effect this Sunday, but we wait in order to have these discussions with folks who will be affected by this before we make those changes. I think that is only right. That is due to the people who will be affected in these communities, that we not make these changes so fast. And I get 2019, it's 2021. I mean, a person could have came to the meeting 19 and shared their opinions, but did we circle back to those folks who came in 2019 and 2020 to say, hey, this is what our findings are? This is what we're going to do? Here's the timeline. I don't believe that has occurred. And you correct me if I'm wrong after I'm finished, whether that has occurred or not. So I'm pleading with you all and asking you all to not make these cuts so quickly, but rather have time to interact with the folks who will be impacted by these cuts on these routes, to further dialogue with them about what it is that they need, or to even come up with, hey, well, listen, we can, cut the frequency of the bus, maybe not cut the bus out, but maybe cut the frequency that'll still allow them to have access to this route as they try to move along from East 129th West, 140th to 152nd Street. For example, the bus that runs along 152nd Street lets riders out right in front of the 5 Point Center. The 5 Point Center offers social services support. They offer help with home repairs for residents of our community. We provide a senior food program there, a pantry once a month, pantry 4 times a month, produce 1 time a month. So, think about, some of the aspects and things that are going along on these routes that I'm asking you all to consider, before making these decisions final. I get Sunday is upon us. And so again, I thank the chairman for bringing this meeting together, but our residents deserve a little bit more interaction and communication about what's proposed here than what we've seen thus far. Thank you.
Mr. Joe Frolick, do you have any response? I think my colleague, Mr. Hairston, has highlighted some of the major issues. It sounds like he's had conversations with you about this previously. Do we have any possible resolutions to some of the situations that he's facing in his neighborhood?
Mr. Chairman, if I jump in before Mr. Frolick, and let me just say thank you for some of the enhancements that RTA has put in place. I don't want to minimize some of the enhancements that RTA has worked on as well. But we can't view this from through one lens. We have to view this from each of the lenses that we have, and the good, the bad, and everything in between. Thank you.
Mr. Frolick, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and through you to Councilman Hairston. I believe that RTA's response to the concerns of Councilman Hairston should be very, very similar, if not exactly the same as the response to the colleague from Ward 9, that Councilman Conwell. We're talking about the same issue and the same neighborhood, and I would like to make the same commitment that we will work with you through the summer in whichever way you guide us, because sometime before cold weather sets in, I would like to be able to hear these issues more closely and see what we can do, because walking is harder in the winter than in the summer. And although it's not possible with our contractual process to postpone, we will move forward with our improvements. Clevelanders are waiting for those improvements and are counting on them. But I do want to talk further with both these esteemed councilmen and their constituents to see what else we can do, because we greatly value improving service, and most especially to those who need us most. So we share values. We sometimes have to talk more before we agree on means and methods, but we share goals.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hairston, and thank you, Mr. Frolick, for having flexibility. I would urge you to have your people reach out to every single council member so that we won't have any situations with any of the members of Cleveland City Council. Make sure that you go over those. And as the chairman, I like to see the proposed changes in each of the territories. Where our team is prepared right now to go through that. That's Mrs. Pooh Miller, so we can understand a little bit better And we do appreciate the fact that our two who would like to speak, the Ward 7, Bashir Jones, and then we have our distinguished colleague, Kevin Bishop in Ward 2.
Thank you so much.
Bashir Jones, you have the floor. You have the floor, Bashir Jones.
You're saying it in slow motion, man. I don't know what's going on over there, man. But Chairman, first I want to say that I'm truly honored, man, to be here in this meeting with you, man, chairing it. You know, you're doing a phenomenal job, man. I'm really enjoying just being a part of it and seeing you in that space as a chairman. Man, my community is thrilled about this meeting. Phenomenal leader, man, it looks good on you, man. It looks good on you, man. And I want to say to Councilman Conwell how much I appreciate his passion. I always love to hear Councilman Conwell. He has been a leader in our community, and as well as he plays those drums, man, he knows how to beat the other drums when necessary. And his passion around this process and his footwork on the ground level is unmatched. And I appreciate him. You know, this is a major issue. And Councilman Harrison, man, he said it masterfully, what he said. This is a major issue. And I haven't met, besides Mrs. Minor, the people at an RTA. I look forward to it because, listen, we understand that institutions have to make changes, have to stick with the times. You know, we understand that. I think that everyone understands that and gets that. But the question that I want you to think about is, number one, particularly when transportation, you know, this past year, Cleveland passed legislation declaring racism a public health crisis. And if we just look at historical references, we know, and I'm not saying that you all are intentionally a part of it, but that's just something I want you to consider, is that transportation has been used in the past to design and the policy for, and please forgive me if this offends you, but I'm just being real, has been designed and almost policed for white comfort, okay? For white comfort. Buses being moved from one place, communities feeling that they didn't want certain people to travel throughout their community, right? So transportation almost was wrapped around that concept. So as we are moving forward, the question I want you to ask yourself is, are we within transportation, are we reducing social inequities? I'm gonna say it again. Within transportation, are we reducing social inequities, or are we truly a part of the problem in regards to structural racism within transportation? And that's a serious thing. And I can tell that from your responses, at least in watching you know exactly what I'm talking about. You understand, and it's not necessarily about quote unquote white comfort now, right? It's more so about institutions. What institutions are backing this process if it's not the institution of the community? And I just want to take a moment there for the gentleman to respond to that.
Mr. Chairman, if I might, I would like to say right away that I'm not at all offended, not quite to the contrary. I'm very pleased to engage in such discussions. And I also like to say just very briefly that for transportation reasons, as well as reasons of equity, the next gen system that launches this Sunday places less concentration on the needs of people who work downtown office jobs and arrive in downtown for work at rush hour and leave downtown for the suburbs in the afternoon rush hour. Because the community spoke during this process when we heard from so many people. And some of the themes of the community were, hey, a little less emphasis on downtown and more emphasis on neighborhoods. And they said, hey, RTA, less emphasis on rush hour. Many of us start work and end work at all times of day and night and weekends too. And we have responded to that. Next Gen emphasizes the all-day service and the weekend service and de-emphasizes the rush hour and the downtown worker, which does improve equity. So it has an equity impact in the right direction, as well as a transportation impact in the right direction. And I'm very pleased to continue the dialogue about just those issues that the councilman has raised within your ward. And the service on Huff Avenue is much better under Next Gen, on running twice as often and reaching more jobs. The number will change from 38 to 9 in order to make that happen. So if there's a resident who says, oh my goodness, 38's gone, please let them know that in place of 38 at each of those stops on Huff, on Lexington, on Payne, there will be a 9. It will run more often and go more places.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Can I get a point? Can I get a point, Mr. Chair or council member? Can I get a point?
I yield to Councilman Conwell.
Well,
Councilman Conwell.
Through the chair to the councilman. He said to you, please let them know. That's his job. And if they were reaching out to the community and the community for them to know about the Next Gen, on the last time I checked, Mr. Chairman, to this distinguished councilman, bus number 38 goes to Collinwood, Glenville, and Huff. That's your route. Why do you have to please let them know now, Mr. Councilman? That's his job with outreach. They did a poor job doing outreach in our community, and that narrates what you were saying, council member. In the African-American community, they helped to create a transit desert. And I yield.
Thank you, Councilman Conwell. And I believe, honestly, to the chair, to the gentleman, I believe it's both of our jobs. You know, I believe it's both of our jobs, and I believe that as members of the community, we have to have a better relationship with RTA. I think it's really important. But let me just be honest with you, and I'm sorry, the gentleman from RTA, what's your name?
My name is Joel Freilich, sir.
Freilich?
Joel Freilich, yes.
Freilich, Mr. Freilich. I'm going to be honest with
Joel.
you. Okay, Joel, thank you, man. I want to be honest with you. And
Mr. Jones, can I ask you to yield for a quick second, please?
Yes, sir.
Will the distinguished gentleman yield? Thank you. Mrs. Poole Miller, there's been a number of colleagues who have issues at this space and time. There has been a request for all 17 wards to show what the differences in terms of the cuts and the services are. We've also asked RTA to get with the different members of council to talk about that. So let's work along with you to make sure that we got Kevin Conwell, that we have all, that there's set up times with all of the council members to go over that. You and I have to sit it down and go over all of these things. I even have a representative that's here on the Zoom via telephone who's concerned about the routes. He's our chairperson in Ward 1 as relates to RTA cuts. And I really need to kind of like bottle this in a way in which, whether it doesn't matter how you shot me. If you shot me by mistake, if you shot me on purpose, I'm still shot. So at the end of the day, we want to make sure that we cover our bases with our public, that we are moving forward and true, strong partnership with RTA. RTA is a fundamental bloodline for our entire city of Cleveland, and Cleveland is the heartbeat, and we have to make sure that that partnership is moving forward in a way where we serve all of our public. And so if you can make sure that you get with RTA rapidly after this session, and make sure that we get all of those changes and propositions that are happening in all of the wards, and we have an opportunity to sit down as a group and go over it, and then come back for a second session, probably in the summertime, to talk about what progress has been made. So I want to do that. And distinguished colleague, you can.
Thank you, Chair.
Will do, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. But let me say openly, and to the gentleman, Mr. Frolic, you know, and I hope this doesn't come across as rude, but I can always appreciate, I appreciate more a white man speaking bluntly about structural racism. That person will always be my friend, and a black person who act like it doesn't exist will always be my opponent. So structural racism is a real thing, and transportation has played a part in that. And I close with this, Chair. Yes, this is something that we all have to get on. My residents have been complaining tremendously. The transportation that was taken off of Wade Park, the transportation that we're talking about cutting. Mr. Johnson told me about some of the cuts looking on 79th. And even if it's just down the block, for our elders who are not able to do much walking, or our young people who have issues with different neighborhoods, right? Who come from one neighborhood and not able to go to another neighborhood because of the violence and stuff within our community. So it's important that we are listening to the people and we're hearing them. And just from the energy that I get from Mr. Frolic, I don't believe that we'll have a problem with it. I just think that we have to open the door, and I'm open to meeting with you and sitting with you. Let me do in closing, Chair, why this was so important what you did. I think this is one of the most powerful meetings that we could have. Listen, man, when it comes to transit has the ability to build equity and to open up opportunities for people within the community, or it can be used opposite. So we have to ask ourselves the question, are we reducing social inequity or are we increasing social inequity? And what institutions benefit, right? That's always have to be the question. What institutions benefit from the removal of certain routes, right? Because I know that there's institutions, business community, corporate Cleveland that has some say so in this, but I'm sure that they even themselves want to make sure that there's different routes and different things in place that can get workers into their buildings. I say this in closing once again. Not only do we have to look at how we're changing, you know, I'm sorry, I had a brain freeze. Not only do we have to look at how we are changing the bus routes, but we also, Mr. Chair, have to take a look at how we're dealing with policing amongst RTA as well. We have to look at how we're dealing with the fare adjustments as well. We have to look at all of those things and making sure that all of that is of benefit to the community in which we serve. I'm open. I look forward to meeting with RTA very, very soon. I would like to see what cuts are happening, what's better, so that I can bring it to my community. And I would like for us to set up a community meeting where I can bring RTA so that they can hear the voices of the people that matter most, which is our residents. But once again, RTA, I appreciate you all. I remember riding the 2 my whole life, man, going from 79 to MLK. So the 2 is so important to me. You know what I mean? Riding that 3, you know, down Superior. You know, this plays a major part on people's lives. And one adjustment can change somebody's life. It can change their life. And we want to make sure that we're ultra sensitive to that. The city and RTA must work together in a better way, because I don't think that we're doing a good enough job. But soon we will. All right. Thank you, Chair.
To the chair.
I want to thank my colleague Bashir. Just a moment. I'll acknowledge in a moment. I want to thank my colleague Bashir Jones for your comments and your thoughtfulness on how we should be working together in partnership. I really appreciate your words and your comments. And before we move on to open the floor to RTA, I do want to acknowledge Mr. Kevin Bishop will be up next after RTA. And then we have a member of the community who wants to say a couple of words. So go ahead, RTA.
To the chair, thank you for allowing me to respond. And I want to respond specifically to a couple of things. One, the social determinants of health and racism as a public health crisis. As you know, that was my project in the city of Cleveland, and personally and professionally, that is critically important to me. I believe that is one of the reasons why in RTA's 2020 strategic plan that they added a position, the position that I now occupy, so that we can make sure that we have somebody who's looking at things in addition to the entirety of the staff that's looking at things like that. I am fully aware and completely cognizant that transportation is one of the elements of the social determinants of health. This Next Gen project touches the other components of the social determinants of health. It connects with greater frequency and access to healthcare. It connects with greater frequency and access to education. It connects with greater frequency and access to employment. It connects with greater frequency and access to civic engagement and entertainment in and around our city. We are fully aware that approximately 74% of our community is in an economic status that is dependent on RTA. And that is why this Next Gen project is completely focused on access. Unlike previous cuts to RTA as referenced in Joel's presentation 10 years ago, and in this presentation throughout various wards, he spoke fluently to specific lines that had not had evening or weekend service for a decade. We are in a position today where this Next Gen is not about reduction. It is about access. And it is about access because the leaders here that even before I came to this organization were focused on how do you connect the community, and that is why they did go out to the community. It may not have been as specific as a ward by ward basis, but we were in contract with a national entity, Jared Walker and Associates, that does this across the country in our approach to reaching the community. It is fundamentally unfair to assume and project that RTA is not concerned with and is unaware of the economic status of our ridership. We are full aware of that. And I don't want anyone listening to this presentation to think that we are not aware of our ridership. Like many of you, I grew up on this bus line. And when I came to this organization and in the interview process, my questioning was around this, not only for my professional development, because I am personally connected to this from my own family circumstances. So this matters. Next Gen matters, and Next Gen matters for our ridership in the city of Cleveland. That is why it is access frequency. That is why we're doing this. That is why I'm over here. And to many of you as a trusted friend, you know my portfolio and my track record in the city of Cleveland. I would not be of anything that is not connecting Cleveland residents to a better quality of life. And so I just want to say that we are concerned about residents. And that is why this comprehensive system redesign, first time since 1975, when this organization was created, take a comprehensive view of how we provide better service, better connectivity, better access to residents in the city of Cleveland and countywide. And while I understand the anxiety about the unknown, it would be advantageous to all of us to assume a win-win situation. The numbers may have changed on some of the bus lines, but the access is greater. So I grew up on the 48A, right? That is one of the things, there's some changes in that. I asked Joel myself when I came here, is this still gonna go up into Tarkington to 173rd, 178th? Because I grew up on 173rd. I still know the residents over in that community. I still engage in that community. And I learned, right, my anxiety was decreased because I learned that the revision was for a betterment. And so we will sit down with each of you. And a reason why I was hired, because I know that the competition was fierce, but I do understand and recognize that one of the reasons why I was selected is because I know this city and I know you all, and we will sit down with you all because this organization does want to have a stronger, better, tighter relationship with each of you, not one that's accusatory, but one that is working in partnership for our community.
Chair, can I respond to that, please?
Before you would have a response, and the chairman will allow that response, I do want to address Mrs. Minor of RTA. I see your passion and your piece there. I do like the terms partnership and working together on the differences, as well as open, honest, straightforward communications on the issues. I think that what you're hearing here is from my colleagues, their opinions and thoughts about their community and their respective territories. And so at the end of the day, each of the council members fight for making sure that they're bringing the representation they need to in their districts and their communities. So as you've heard me say earlier, I am appreciative of the fact that RTA is showing that it is not a rigid process. This is not something that's totally written in the stone, and that there's some flexibility here because it's going to be needed. There's a lot of things that are coming down the pipeline. We need to have a partnership. We need to make sure that, not only are we talking about the services in this particular change here, but we need to look down the road 2 or 3 steps. As many of those who work for RTA, certainly you've seen the hammer over the years of state funding cuts, as well as there may be potential funding cuts in the future. The partnership and making sure that we provide for all of the citizens of the city of Cleveland an opportunity to get back and forth to where they need to be. So I appreciate the passion, but the issues are still there. You can see the neighborhoods in the city of Cleveland, and you can certainly see the differences in the city of Cleveland from one area to the next. It's very obvious. And so these council members are fighting for their territories. So certainly to RTA, don't take it personal. It's not, these are representatives who represent 25,800 people, and they need to make sure that the decisions you're making there are in the best interest of their constituents. That's all this is. And with that being said, I will open the floor to Mr. Barsher Jones, and then we have, and then we will, if you could be quick with it, Mr. Jones. We do have Kevin Bishop that wants to say,
It'll be quick, sir.
some words, and then Colin will with another word.
It'll be quick. It'll be quick. I appreciate the
Go
passion.
ahead, Mr. Jones.
I appreciate the
You have the
passion
floor.
of Mrs. Minor. I appreciate her passion, but let me be honest with you. Only a fool would just assume the best from institutions that have historically made decisions that weren't in the best interest of Black and poor people in the city. Only a fool would just assume that. There is historical context in what we are saying. And you know this as a historian, and I appreciate your passion. I have much respect for you. And you just got there, and I would not want, as far as institutions, to put that on your back for you to have to explain the racial injustice that institutions have engaged in for a long, long time, long before I was born, long before you were born. So what we're saying is, we appreciate your passion, but this is personal for me. This is personal. Why is it personal? It's because, if we just assume that this is going to be a great thing, I haven't heard about this at all. Residents in my community haven't heard of this at all. So should we just expect that everything is going to be okay? Should we just expect it? I haven't seen the plan. My residents haven't seen the plan. So should I just say, well, we just know that an institution that has not historically done right by my community, should I just assume that everything is going to be all right? No, we're not assuming. What we're saying is we want to see what you're so passionate about. Whatever you're so passionate about, I want to see that plan. I want my community to see that plan. I want them to be as passionate about it as you are. And if they are not as passionate about it as you are, then that's what the problem is. That's where the balance must come in at. We must create a real partnership between the city, between the residents, between RTA. This is extremely important. So once again, I appreciate your passion, but I would be foolish to assume that institutions that have not put the people first will automatically begin to do that. No, they won't do it until we force them to do it. And I stand with Councilman Conwell to say, if we are not including the community and residents' concerns are not being heard, I don't know what national group came in. I don't know who came in and who you talked to, but I was just speaking to a resident just the other day and they were complaining about cuts. Okay, so this is not something we're just talking about. This is something that we are living. We are experiencing. And I know you understand that. You understand that language because you come from where I come from. But we're not going to let the institution just say, hey, just trust us. No, 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 no. We're not doing that. That time period is done. Thank you, Chair.
Fair point.
You're muted.
Excuse me. I do want to take the opportunity to say thank you. Want to open this up to my colleague who has, my neighbor, Kevin Bishop, to have some words here as well. And thank you, distinguished gentleman, Mr. Bishop, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Great job. A couple of years ago, I had a conversation with somebody over at RTA, and I expressed to them that it was residents in my area that wanted enhanced service over on Warner Road. So I want to give a shout out and get a kudos because we having some service come down Warner Road. My residents will definitely be pleased about that. But I do also want to, at the same time, want to back up all of my colleagues' concerns about the lack of transparency and communication and working together with the RTA to get the message out in Cleveland as far as changes to the transportation plan, enhancements, cuts. And I want to say a cut in service in Ward 30 or Ward 60 is a cut to Cleveland everywhere. An enhancement is to service in my ward is an enhancement to service everywhere in the city. So I do understand the frustrations with my other members who had service cut because that service that's cut in their area affects my area also. I also want to give a shout to Walker Minor for her passion. I truly, we go way back with the 48 and the 19. I was a RT rider back in the day too. So anyway, I just want to give thanks to the RTA for that the service on Warner Road, and I am pleased at some of the enhancements in my area. But at the same time, I do want to increase the community outreach when we do decide to sit down and make changes to the service, because we all play a role and we all have residents and we all serve the same boss, as Kevin Conwell would say. We all serve the same people. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Bishop, Kevin Bishop. As usual, you're very brief. Really appreciate you. I want to recognize Ward Councilman Conwell for some more discussion, but if we could, Mr. Conwell, keep it brief. I do want to allow for one member of the community to have an opportunity to ask some questions and just talk about his personal experiences on what these proposed changes will mean to him. Mr. Conwell, you have the floor.
Yeah, I just want to elaborate on Councilmember Barsha Jones. He's definitely right. To the chair, when you listen to Froelich, he doesn't know my neighborhood, and you say you talk with the community. Here's some examples. Here's some evidence. Councilmember Barsha Jones, Councilmember Anthony Harrison, as well as myself, received 500 signatures. So if they knew RTA, they would know who to send the signatures to. That's number one. You know, they cast the blame on us because they didn't have anyone else to reach out to. Councilman, you know how that goes. Here's some historical history. Froelich he knows some years ago, they cut the number 3. We were here. They took the number 3 right out. And my residents, we had to battle with RTA. And they said, you know what, Councilman, you're right. And they put in the line number 38 back in. So now here we are again, battling to get to keep our route. And here's another example, Mr. Chairman, that they don't know. He keeps narrating to you about East 123rd Street. As Councilmember Anthony Harrison mentioned, you got Arlington back there, you have Captain Arthur Ross back there, you have other schools, you have East 125th Street as well. So that tells me they don't know anything about, they just cut our residents out. And Councilmember Anthony Harrison would tell you that. And what about Huff also? What about the residents there? So I'm asking you, Mr. Chairman, since they don't know, and I listened to, she's a good friend of mine, Chief Walker Minor. I still call her Chief Walker Minor. And you mentioned about the health, it's a health issue. So manage the health legislation, take it over there with you. You're creating barriers to employment for my residents. You're upping absenteeism, you're upping tardiness when you take us out. You're hurting the community. You're hurting them by taking away the number 38 bus line, Mr. Chairman. You know, they didn't even tell us, like Councilmember Bashir Jones said, we haven't seen the plan. They have $270 million, Mr. Chairman, that comes to them before my residents even put a nickel in the box. Before my residents and your residents and Councilmember Anthony Harrison even put a nickel in the box, they have $270 million there. Did they make cuts dealing with their operations, or you just cut the bus line? Because we have not seen their master plan or their strategic plan, sir. We haven't seen it. They are narrating, and he didn't even put the cuts in there. You had to ask him about it, Mr. Chairman. You had to ask him. So am I passionate about my residents? And do I love my residents? Yes, I do. Yes, I do love my residents. And I am passionate. I've been out on 123rd as well, may I add, 125th Street in Superior all week long, talking with the residents in the community, asking them to call RTA and asking them to send letters to RTA about these cuts. So I thank you for listening to me, Mr. Chairman, and I'm passionate about it. Thank you, and God bless.
Anytime, and to RTA officials, I urge you to get with Ward Councilman Kevin Conwell, Ward Councilman Anthony Harrison, and any other colleagues that need a serious look at the situations that they're faced with. They have a number of constituents who have already taken out petitions and are concerned about that. I think that would be the immediate start. And then with that, if Mrs. Poole or whoever's operating the system, we do have a Mr. Eric Stewart that is from the community. I do want to have in all of our forums, if we have people who are from the neighborhood or community who want to have some input, I would love for them to have the same opportunities. I would ask that Mr. Stewart, given the fact that we have a short time period, if you could be brief, we would be very appreciative of it, hit the points that are important. And we look forward to working with the community to make sure that the next gen that has been put together by RTA, it will have the kind of input needed to make it truly a great program for all of the citizens of the city of Cleveland and for the greater people who live within the region. Can you open that up for Mr. Eric Stewart? He's on the phone. Thank you. Mr. Stewart, you can take your line off of mute.
Okay, you can hear me now?
We hear you loud and clear.
Okay, my name's Eric Todd Stewart. I'm going to get to it. I should mention that in 2019, I spoke with Joe Fryerlich 3 occasions in reference to the number 48A route being expanded and requesting being notified if there's going to be any changes on it. He said there would not be any changes. They would work to expand the route, meaning the weekend service. I spoke to him 4 times in 2020, the same questions, the same response. About 8 weeks ago, and I filled out both surveys that were sent that I had access to and put questions in there, and there was no acknowledgement that my questions were put in place, nor has there been any acknowledgement to this point. About 8 weeks ago, I called Joe Fryerlich and asked him about the number 48A route, And had I not called him, I would not know that the plan had been put in place for the number 48A route to be changed to the number 50. Be clear, I am not frustrated. I am not angry. I do see a clear breakdown in the healthy maximizing of efficiency for the number 48A route, consequently the RTA bus service. Presently, the number 48A route begins at its furthest eastern point at South Miles and East 178th or 177th. It turns down one of the next side streets to Tarkington. It goes west on Tarkington, crosses Lee Road, turns north on Lee Road, goes down Seville, through a pocket of the neighborhood that everybody in the neighborhood is familiar with, is known as the Village. Then it moves through Ohio, then it turns north on 143rd, and then west on Kane to 131st. That is still in place according to this next gen, and it should stay in place, and there should be weekend service. Here's where the issue is, though. They want to change the number 48A to the number 50. That's unnecessary, and it doesn't even improve, and they kept using the word improve in this conversation, the efficiency of the service. Presently, the number 48A and the number 48 bus at going north from 131st and Miles to their traditional route share a combined route. They run in either 30-minute or 20-minute intervals between the two of them. So essentially, 5 days a week, they run that way. And it runs through University Circle, Shaker Square, so it goes to University Hospital, and it goes to Cleveland Clinic, and it ends somewhere off, I think, 81st or 89th in Euclid. There's no reason to change that. It's clear, it's clean, and it's a traditional route that people identify with. On the other side of 131st and Miles, the Marymount 48 bus presently, I think, only has hourly service. If this number 50 route coming from the western point of Miles turns south on 131st and combines with the 48 bus, then now it can combine their service, and they will run on 30-minute intervals, so that there would be 30-minute or 20-minute intervals both directions. And then the 48A would still be an hourly bus from 131st and Kane back up to where it usually ends. This is the better idea, and this was not considered. Had it been given room for there to be conversation in the distant past at this point, for the community to talk with Joel Freilich and whoever else was involved in this, then it could have been proposed to them. This number 50 route, which I think at its furthest western point starts somewhere near downtown, maybe Public Square, can come the route that is being proposed to run, except for when it gets to 131st and Miles, instead of breaking a short distance to the south and then a quick left turn east up Kane, it should just go straight over to Marymount Hospital. Then it touches Marymount Hospital. It goes through University Circle, so it goes to University Hospital. I think it might touch the back end, based on what's being proposed right now, a Cleveland Clinic, and it's going to pull more people who only want to catch one bus to those hospitals. But what he's proposing now is not going to be able to do that. And it's an unnecessary change in the routing, and it's inefficient. The issue here with me, with what I'm describing to you here, and each one of the board of directors has what I've described, each one of them, is that the community was proposing over and over again that they wanted weekend service. I don't know anybody that said that they wanted the route change. I see no need in the pursuit of healthy efficiency for the route to be changed. But the route's been changed without consideration of the public. I asked Joel, myself, when was the decision made to change this to the number 50? He would not answer me. He just kept saying it's too late to do anything about it. When was the decision made that it was too late to do anything about it? He wouldn't address that either. So my issue here is this. It shouldn't change at all. It should not change at all. The neighborhood should be able to say, listen, we like this route the way that it is now. We just wanted weekend service. I'm an occasional rider. I ride that bus on occasion, not frequently, but on occasion. I thought weekend service should be restored too. A lot of folks still use Carouge Park, and a lot of folks still want to go do shopping over in Shaker Square, and they don't want to catch more than one bus. Okay, so I do think that should have happened, but I didn't see, if somebody had said to me, well, we're going to change it to the number 50 and everybody's going to have to change buses at 131st and Miles, I would have said no to that. And I know, although it wouldn't compromise my lifestyle very much, I know numerous older people that do not want to change buses at 131st and Miles to go where they want to go as far as Shaker Square. Presently, you can catch one bus to Shaker Square on the 48A, and as I've described to you, and I will not describe again because I have documented this, that that's the most efficient route. And if there's some issue with wanting to make sure that the hospitals are connected, then what I just proposed in this phone call connects them better, much better than them having to change and pick up another bus. That extends the rider time. Joel has not been straight with us, okay? I've tried to get in touch with these Walker Group people out in Oregon to find out what their participation was directly from them. I left 3 messages over a 3-week period of time. I never received any acknowledgement that they even received the messages, okay? So I'm saying this again. You need to not do anything right now. There haven't been enough people that have had input. Joel did not say when this proposal was put in place, he wouldn't answer the question. On the surveys, there's no way for you to tell that anything was going to be put in place, okay? We should be talking with people to find out if their questions in the survey were answered as well. So I am going to be more appreciative of time, and I'm going to stop right there as far as 48A goes, but I want to make this clear as well. That number 15A bus that Joel told you about an hour or so back just was going to have minuscule change as a result of it being taken out. Well, the 15A goes off of 177th and Harvard, down Walden, in the entirety of Bartlett and a portion of 154th. If there's no more service on Bartlett, as far as the 15A goes, or any bus, or that short portion of 154th, and you include Walden and 177th, that small portion that Joel told you about amounts to 52 bus stops that are now going to be removed. And that adds, for people who are walking just from the distance of the middle of that block, middle of that section of town between Kinsman and Harvard, that adds their walk to a bus, meaning the 14 or the 15, about 600 meters, maybe 800 meters, depending on where you're at. This needs to stop. If there's a moratorium available, if there's a way to cease it, it needs to be ceased now. It's not going to cost any money to cease it, and what I'm proposing to you is not going to run up the cost of the bus service. What I'm proposing is not going to run up the cost of the bus service.
Well, thank you, Mr. Stewart. I really appreciate your thoroughness and do want to give RTA an opportunity to respond to that. What RTA has stated earlier was that they're open to change and they're flexible. And that's something that's good to hear, one. And then two, as relates to a moratorium, the council someone would have to propose it, second it, and then we would move from there. But, you know, in the spirit of working together and being in partnership, I think it's important to allow for what we've initially talked about, to meet with the various different communities and talk about how the proposed next gen will impact those neighborhoods, which you are the chairperson for Ward 1. We really appreciate your leadership, and Mr. Joel will be, Mr. Frolick will be sitting down with us to talk about those changes along with your committee and Pearl Thompson and others who are part of that. And then we will have a community meeting in Ward 1, hopefully within the next 35, 40 days. So I do want to say the proposition of the council, we don't have the authority because RTA is an entity within itself. At the same time, I am glad to see that to the council and the public to open with the proposed changes, and they're open to making changes to their existing. Mr. Frolick, to have any comments on what has been presented by Mr. Eric Stewart.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity. I just want to say that this is one of those cases where people who agree on goals don't immediately agree on the methods. But I'm very pleased with what you propose going forward, Mr. Chairman, in terms of further conversation with leadership in Ward 1. Thank you.
With that being said, is there any other members? I do see our new member, Mrs. Gardner, Anita Gardner. If you wanted to say something, I would love to have you say something. It's good to see you here. You have to take your mute off. You're muted right now. We can't hear you.
Okay, how about now?
Yeah, we hear you loud and clear.
Okay, well, this is definitely affecting Ward 4 dramatically. Before I was council, I definitely was out picketing RTA over the loss of several of our bus lines. And trust me, I understand everybody's argument. And there is a large need for our community to be brought in on these changes, whether positive or negative. So definitely, I'm all in on trying to get the residents' view of how it's going to, affect the community. So I am very pleased to be in on this conversation. It is very interesting. And I feel like a lot of the council representatives have very valid views of, what's going on with RTA. So until I am more educated on these conversations, I definitely would love to keep this conversation open with not just council, but with the residents as well. Thank you.
Thank you, distinguished gentle lady, Ms. Gardner. And with that being said, we want to begin the process to wind down. I do see Kevin Conwell. Mr. Conwell, if you could be just brief, we've certainly been here for quite some time now. So, but we get your points, and I know that Mr. Frolick is going to work with you. And I really, again, appreciate the partnership with the RTA. And you have the floor, distinguished gentlemen. If you can not take too much time, I would be appreciative of that. And then I also want to thank all of the council members who were here. And at this point, I'm going to turn the floor over to you, Mr. Conwell. I'm going to ask my vice chairman, Mr. Charlie Slythe, if he could chair the meeting for me. I have to take a break real quick, and I'm going to turn the floor over to you, distinguished Kevin Conwell. And thank you, Mr. Slythe.
I'll be real quick, Mr. Chairperson, because I know what I have to do. And I've been down this road before dealing with the number 3, and we came out right. And RTA, I thank them for listening to us. 3 months later, they put in a number 38 with Frolick. And it clearly shows, I was listening to the young man that was narrating, they don't know our neighborhoods where they made the cuts at. And as he mentioned, he talked with Joe, and they didn't come up with any names. I mean, when you do a survey analysis, you write down the name of the individual, you put down what they said, and then you put it into so that you can reach your objectives. And they never did bring that up at all, how they reached out and talked with the people, or this is what the residents said, or anything like that. And that's what I said in the beginning when I was talking about they should have, it's an evaluation process before you make the cuts. And they need to know, and I'm going to end my conclusion. The residents, as I always say, they're your bosses. They're your bosses. And I hear, like what Councilman Marcia Jones said, I mean, you can't you got to walk it like you talk it, or you lose that beat. I'm highly disappointed in the RTA. I used to have a good relationship with them. Mr. Chair, I would go downstate when Eric would call me and lobby for the RTA. So I used to go to their meetings, and I would go downstate, and it's sad that they never called me before they made the cuts. That's a lack of disrespect. I'm not happy with that. So we're gonna move forward. I'll talk with you, Froelich, and I need you to come out to, here's what I need also. I need them to see you. I hear Chief Minor talk. She's a friend of mine, I like her. But I need her to walk 123rd Street. I need her to go out and talk with the residents. I need them to reach out to them and let them know that they have resources to pick them up. It's a shame that they don't know these things and you just made cuts. That's not good. That's that one fatal swoop can wipe everything out. So I am passionate. Am I passionate? Yes, I am passionate. And as Councilmember Kevin Bishop said, it's not only his ward, it's the entire city. I'm very passionate about it. And you make these cuts and you increase absenteeism and tardiness, and you're creating a barrier to employment where people can't go to work, then crime goes up. Crime go up in our neighborhood. So I'm not happy. You got to make it right. We do need a moratorium. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilman Conwell, and just to make sure that thank you for your advocacy, first of all. And I know that there's been a lot of requests back to staff, but I want to make sure we're getting all of them. I think one of them, based on what you're saying, is a more some sort of narrative or other description of the surveying process. And then maybe as well, I heard earlier a question about, if there's any demographics or other information about the survey responders that would help City Council understand who is participating, to what degree, and to kind of unravel that aspect of RTA's outreach. Okay, I'm seeing a thumbs up. So Ms. Poole Miller, if you could make sure that that's on your list as well, I'd appreciate that. With that, seeing no other hands, I know Councilman Jones was just stepping away for a second, but I know we were moving towards a conclusion. I'll say, I've a thought of mine. I've been engaged kind of on my own with RTA throughout this, just because I've been working on a couple of other things with them. So it was just maybe an ease of conversation. And then in Ward 17, at least, I really very much appreciate the enhanced service around Riverside Park, which is one of the fourth or fifth largest CMHA properties. But since it's so far west, sometimes people forget it's there. So that's going to be a great access for residents of that property to get back to town and work and school and what have you. But I think most importantly, something that we can do, and hopefully the next gen as it is, as it comes live, will do, is increase ridership. And if we're able to get more butts into seats, that is really the best way that we can ensure that we're maintaining the robust type of bus, train, transit network that we want. And I'm optimistic that we'll be able to, be adding routes in the future, not just in places that, maybe they're gonna lose immediate service, but also to other places as the region grows and people see transit as a viable option. So with that, I want to thank Councilman Jones for getting this Transportation Committee hearing set up today. Thank you to everyone at RTA for participating and for answering our questions. And I will go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everyone.
Have a great day.
Thank you.